Well, the opioid crisis, Juliet, in New Hampshire is still an ongoing crisis. And obviously, we've been throwing a lot of resources at it at the state level. Obviously, we've proposed some different legislations. We have a task force that's addressing some of those issues. Granted hammer from a law enforcement standpoint, giving resources to local law enforcement to interdict some of these drugs, illegal drugs. But on the treatment side, we just recently dedicated the Friendship House. I should say a groundbreaking at the Friendship House, which is a $5.4 million residential treatment facility. And so it'll be increased from 18 to about 32 beds once the project is completed. We had the kickoff last week. Both U.S. senators were there. Marty Bolden was there from the governor's office with regards to drug and alcohol, and a lot of other stakeholders. And I think prior to that, we had a dedication in Ospey for the White Mountain Addiction, or the White Horse Addiction Center, which was also looking at the treatment of drugs and obviously recovery. I think as we're getting more resources into the state, building more capacity on the treatment and recovery side, but we also need to continue to educate our young population about the dangers of opioids, and obviously it's a potential gateway drug to heroin and fentanyl and carfentanil. And so, and our first responders are really subject to a lot of dangers when it comes to the carfentanil, because if they get it on their arm, it suddenly, could potentially permeate their skin, and then obviously they're down at that point. Very powerful drug, carfentanil. It's really a tranquilizer for elephants. So if you get that into your system, you're not going to last long. So, but we're kind of plateauing in the state as far as the amount of deaths with regards to the opioid crisis, but we still have a long ways to go to really to take it on and to educate our population of the ills of opioids. And it really strikes across generational grounds, from different diversified groups of people. I had one lady in my area who was 38 years old, 3 young kids, and one Friday night with her husband overdosed with heroin. And those kids grow up without a mother and father, and it's ridiculous, but there are smart people who are taking drugs, illegal drugs, that are not going to help their family out at all.
Well, on an unrelated note, I guess we have the DOT update.
Sure. Well, one of the reasons why I'm in Plymouth today, Juliet, is that we had a hearing on the Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation, and we basically do that every 2 years. We give an update on what the status of transportation is in New Hampshire, and we have this thing called the 10-year Highway Improvement Plan, and that usually is started at the Department of Transportation level. It kicks over to the regional planning commissions, and they kind of prioritize the projects. There's a lot of input given by local communities and citizens. So once it reaches the, we call it the GASSET, the Governor's Advisory Commission on Intermodal Transportation, once it reaches that level, then we go out and have public hearings. So I'm headed to a public hearing in Laconia tonight. We were at one this morning in Littleton, so I'll have a total of 8 public hearings in my district, just talking about the need of various infrastructure projects, road projects, and transit projects, so that people, in the regional level can have input into their transportation system. And so once we gather all the input, the GASSET Executive Committee, which is consists of the 5 executive counselors and the Department of Transportation chairman, will get together and we'll kind of prioritize, based off the input, what we think should be in the 10-year highway improvement plan. Then it goes to the governor for signature at the end of the year, and then at the beginning of next year it will go to the legislature, and then they'll tweak it, and then hopefully we'll have a new 10-year highway plan in June of next year. But it's very important, particularly with a lot of the costs of doing infrastructure projects has gone up exponentially, and so there is less money coming from Washington, And so New Hampshire really has to tighten its belt and prioritize exactly what needs to get done. So many projects, but so few resources to get them all done. So it's always an ongoing issue with transportation.
That leads us right into roads, to our roads here in Plymouth, with the Northern Pass project possibly coming through, and we have the video up playing from the other day, so I'm not sure if you could touch on what's going to happen like in the future.
Well, I could talk a little bit about that, but while I'm thinking of it, there is a regional a project that scored high here in Plymouth, which is the Highland Street area. And so I think it's scheduled for 2027 to be completed or started. And there's a lot of the local selectmen and town administrator want to see if we can't push up that timeline. Obviously, it would be the second and third segment of that road, so it needs to be done, and we'll just see if we can push it up. So I'll be having those discussions later in the year. As far as Northern Pass has been going on for many years. A lot of discussion. Obviously, we're looking at a transmission line from Pittsburgh all the way down to Deerfield, and about 80% of it runs through my district that I represent, which runs from Claremont to Pittsburgh to Milton. And so with that, the Site Evaluation Commission has the application from Eversource, and they're looking at the different components of that application. More recently, they've been looking at Route 118, 116, 112 from Bethlehem through Franconia, Easton, all the way down to North Woodstock and down into ultimately Plymouth. And I think the concern that the rally brought out the other day was what's going to happen potentially those 2 years if this permit is issued and they move forward with Northern Pass, what's going to happen to downtown Plymouth. Downtown Plymouth has a lot of merchants, has a lot of activity, has student activity, has outside activity. It's really a central kind of hub for a lot of activity. And how would a project of that magnitude, be allowed to happen, or and how would it impact the local community here in Plymouth? So, from water and sewage to right-of-ways to closing down potentially of some businesses as far as their frontage. We just got done a bridge project over in Piermont. They had to shut down the bridge for 2 weeks. It was originally set for 3 weeks, but they were able to do it in 2 weeks. The Department of Transportation got the bridge opened up again after 2 weeks, did a great job, expedited the project. Well, I'm talking to one of the local merchants, in that 2 week period, they lost 40% of their business on the other side of the river. And so if it had been 3 weeks, they would have lost another 40%. So they're very appreciative that that project moved very quickly. How is the Northern Pass behemoth going to come into downtown Plymouth without the type of impact that would be detrimental to businesses into the university system? So a lot of people are in opposition to it, from Pittsburgh to Deerfield, particularly in northern New Hampshire. What's going to happen now is that the earliest that the Site Evaluation Committee will make a determination would probably be March of next year. Right now they're looking at, I know the Grafton County Attorney is looking at some of the right-of-way issues along that route with regards to DOT and who owns the property, was the road, were those roads properly laid out. Some of the wiring will have to go under streams and rivers. If they're want to take the alternate path that they want to take. The U.S. Forest Service has weighed in. They're willing to give 11 miles of their U.S. forest land to Northern Pass, which I personally don't think is a good thing. But they also, there's been suggesting to use I-93 right-of-ways, but when it comes to Franconia, that's problematic because they have narrow roadways and they have restrictions with regards to what can be along the side of the road through Franconia Notch. So this is a project that keeps kind of pushing forward, but no one seems to understand, at least from my standpoint, and representing this here, truly what the outcome is going to be. Because obviously, if they approve the permit, I think there'll be many years of litigation, and somehow, if it's never built, you'll see a lot of sigh of relief from a lot of people. But the whole idea is, it's renewable energy from Canada. It's there really to support the New England grid. The beneficiaries, in my judgment, will be Southern New England. New Hampshire will not benefit. They'll say that, well, there'll be some benefit as far as the fluctuation of rates, but it will never truly lower the cost to the ratepayers. And I honestly believe that we'll be stranded, much like we have in the past, with some type of stranded cost to either build a system or to help operate it in some way. So, I mean, there's a lot of complications with this project, but what I think the bottom line that concerns me is it seems like we're trying to coach the applicant along to say what is it they need to do in order to make the project happen, rather than treating it as a project. Is it good or is it bad? Just straight up, yes or no. Because what happens is that, people get the feeling that they're pushing this down our throats, this massive project. And I get it. We need, energy. We need electricity. But we also have the New England grid that is coming in from, Vermont and through Monroe and Haverhill. That is, the proposal is to expand that and to bring in over, 1,000 megawatts of power. We're going through the most pristine land that New Hampshire has to offer with Northern Pass. It is ridiculous to even think of that, when you look at the natural beauty and what we're trying to preserve for generations. It's the fire sites, yes. Very interesting. Great job by the Unified Command from federal, state, and local. The firefighters from Lincoln and the surrounding areas are doing a great job. When I was there yesterday, they were building kind of a team of like 60 firemen to try to build a trench around the fire. It's basically on top of, as I call it, Lost River Gorge area. And so the fire has really been elevated. They say it's about 2,300 feet up there. And so what the problem has been really is trying to get to the fire. So they've brought in National Guard Blackhawks to drop water on top of the fire. There are 600-700 gallons kind of baskets where they go into the beaver pond, they scoop it up, and they bring it over to where the fire is, and they drop water. And they have a smaller aircraft up there that's dropping about 75 gallons. So I think what they're doing is it's still ongoing. They're preparing kind of for the long haul, but once they extinguish it, it will be done and over with. And I think they have the Grafton County Communications Center there. So there's a lot of great people involved in this operation. It started out, I believe, was 25 acres. I think as of last night, it spread a little bit more. Obviously, it's a concern anytime you have an active fire, and it's also going on to the other side of the mountain, which is the U.S. forest area as well. But a lot of the land is within, I believe it's North Woodstock area. So it's anytime you're dealing with fire, you let the experts handle how to put it out, and they're doing a great job up there. Yeah, the meteorite theory is kind of interesting because the way the meteorite goes through the atmosphere and hits the earth, some experts have suggested that wouldn't cause a fire, but since there's a lot of hiking trails up there from the Lost River area, I would suggest that maybe it was either a campfire site or a cigarette or something that might have started that. Well, let's talk a little bit about state government with our commissioners and a new governor. We got a lot of new commissioners, Commissioner of Education. We have this new department that was kind of broken up, if you will. It used to be called the Department of Resource and Economic Development, DRED, and now it's the Natural and Cultural Resource Department, along with the Business and Economic Affairs Department, which is now being over, they now have a new commissioner with the BEA, it's called, and that's being headed by Taylor Carswell, who's a North Country native from Littleton. And so he'll oversee the economic development side, along with travel and tourism. I think workforce development is in there. And then he has some partnerships with the New Hampshire Community College System, New Hampshire Housing, Community Development Finance Authority, and the Business Finance Authority. So it's a good way for him to focus that department really on economic development. And the other is really kind of taking kind of the old state library position and along with historical resources and putting it into natural resource department. Hence, it's the Natural and Cultural Resource Department, head up by Commissioner Jeff Rose. We also now have a new Commissioner of Labor. Ken Merrifield was a former mayor of Franklin, so he's heading up that department. And so we're now looking for a new Commissioner of Corrections. Commissioner Wren retired, so he moved on. And then we're also looking for a Commissioner of Agriculture. Lorraine Merrill has stepped down. And so we have two very important positions that we have to fill at this point. And Jim Wallace now oversees the Business Finance Authority, which is, he's still relatively new to the scene as well. So we've had a lot of new personalities come into state government, approved by Governor and Council. Our Commissioner of Education, Frank Edelblue, is working around the state, talking to administrators, educators, parents and so forth, to try to personalize education so the kids can get the best education that they can. But it's been interesting because, as you know, new administrations kind of bring on new cast of people that kind of build that personality for the administration. And I think the governor more recently has been doing a lot of collection of materials and supplies for the relief effort in Puerto Rico. And we just had a student that we just recognized, or a group of students actually, up in Lincoln at the Linwood Elementary School, a bunch of 4th, 5th graders who basically collected a bunch of materials to send down to Houston, Texas. So there's a lot of that kind of feel that, with the hurricanes, state government and volunteers need to try to help out citizens that are in and outside our country. So it's been good to see that happen as well. The governor, obviously, he's focused on the opioid crisis. He's focusing on a lot of business recruitment, trying to get new business into the state. I know there was a talk about Amazon.com, coming to, or part of it coming to New Hampshire. I'm not sure where that's going to fall out. But he's also looking at, trying to create less regulation in state government to allow businesses and entrepreneurs to be able to grow their businesses in a more relaxed setting, to encourage more business into the state. So he's got a lot on the table. He's a new governor, young governor, a lot of energy, and he's got a lot of initiatives that are going on. So I think there's a lot ahead of us. We have a governor and council meeting coming up next week. So each governor and council meeting, we have a bunch of contracts that we vote on. One of the most important contracts that's going to be coming up is the state health employment benefit contract, which will deal with both current state employees and then also retired state employees with regards to what health plan that they'll get through this contract, whether it'll be Anthem or Harvard Pilgrim. So that's something that we're going to have to do a lot of homework on, a lot of discussion I'm sure will happen at the next Governor and Council meeting. So we, as you know, we vote on millions of dollars with regards to contracts. Obviously we vote on boards and commissions and judicial appointments. We haven't seen too many judicial appointments more recently, but early part of the year we saw quite a few actually, so we get to interview quite a few at that point. So the state, our Adjutant General just stepped down, Bill Riddell, after many years of state service, and congratulations to him. We have a new Adjutant General, Brigadier General Dave Nicolaitis, who's now heading up the National Guard. So there's been quite a few, leadership changes in state government that have happened here, in the last 6 to 8 months. So I'm looking forward to working with them and continuing my role. And my role is really a very aggressive outreach program around the district, which I have to have. I tell people all the time, half of my job is showing up, let people know who I am, what I do, and how I might be able to help them, whether it be a town official or an individual constituent. They might not need me today, but they might need me tomorrow, and so I just let them know the importance of the executive council position and how it might be able to help them navigate state government, the come up with a solution that they might need at the time.
Great. Well, the balsams.
The balsams. We haven't heard the balsams for a while.
Yeah.
Well, the balsams project, in talking to the developer just recently, is moving forward. But like any big project, you got to put the financing together. And so they were, as I understand, they had to go back for a new appraisal because the old appraisal was a little bit outdated. So they had to get that more current. And once that, is approved, then the underwriting occurs. And, you could hear any time now that that proposal could go before the Business Finance Authority for that final financial component to the overall $150 million project. But I know they've been working very closely with the COAS Planning Commission and getting, kind of their site permits for different buildings that they're trying to construct, which is a, very important component. And I do believe they have to get a land alteration permit for one of their bigger buildings. So that is a massive project. It requires a lot of planning and, working along with state government to try to get permits, to try to get infrastructure projects, completed, which I think they still have an outstanding project with the Golf Links Road, which that money will not drop until the overall project and funding for that project is approved. So, and I know they did a lot of road work up near the Balsams the last year and a half, culvert project, road projects. There's just a lot to that because if you look at the massiveness of that project, they really want to make it a year-round resort, from OHRVs to skiing to shopping to staying and enjoying the area, and it's really gonna, if the vision is captured, it's really going to create a lot of buzz in the North Country, and I think you're going to see a lot of out-of-state and international visitors coming to that part of the state because of the balsams and the memories that it holds for many people who had worked and stayed there over the years. It has a lot of weddings took place, a lot of family moments took place. So I think there's a lot of energy and support for that to come back to realization. So I continue to support it. Obviously, we have to be prudent with the finances with regards to any type of state guarantee loan. We have to make sure that it meets the mustard. So that's what will be my focus when that comes before the council. The other big project, which is fairly local, Laconia, we have 200 acres of land down there, the old Laconia property, state school. It's probably about 25 to 30 buildings that are mothballed there. And what's happening through state government, through the legislature and the budget process, they've created a Lakeshore Economic Development Commission. They now have 4 or 5 people who have been appointed locally, along with some legislative appointments and city appointments. So there'll be a complete commission that'll be looking at the economic development of that property, which I think is a good news story because while it won't be like the Pease Development Authority, it will mirror it in many ways, in which is they'll look at it from an economic development perspective and trying to bring in business, try to maybe diversify the property in some cases, create mixed use, and allow the developers come in and provide some jobs and tax revenue for the city of Laconia in the area. So I think George Bald, who's a former DRED Commissioner, Department of Resource and Economic Development Commissioner, who is heading up the PDA, who stepped down, is now going to head up this commission as far as I know, and he's been appointed to that new commission, the Lakeshore Economic Development Commission. So that I'm curious to see how that kind of at one point moves out, because I think it's going to be very important to that region as well.
Definitely. So 30 buildings?
There's about 25 to 30 buildings that are mothballed. There are a couple of buildings that are still in use. The 911 building is still in use, and then there's a residential facility way out back. There was a temporary building that was being used for the Marine Patrol headquarters while that was under construction at Glendale and Guilford. But the folks have moved out and they're in the new building now. So that building's empty as well. So it'll be important to look at and see how everything turns out there. And of course, Laconia has the new Pumpkin Festival, so that's provides a little excitement for the city. And I know the mayor has just stepped away recently because he's has cancer treatment. So we wish the best for Mayor Ed Engler and his family, because I know cancer is never a good thing.
Great. No, but locally, as far as our land, here, the Livermore State. What is it?
The Livermore Falls?
Yeah, Livermore Falls. Is that the official name?
I believe it's the Livermore Falls. That's what I've always called it. It is a state park.
Yeah. It is closed right now.
One of the things, we took a tour through the state parks tour that we took probably about 2-3 weeks ago. We had Commissioner Phil Bryce from State Parks led the effort along with Ben Wilson. And we had Chief Chris Warren from Campton was with us. We had a lot of different folks that were with us just touring that site. Of course, there's the west side and the east side. So the west side, they're looking at a new parking lot, kind of a park and ride parking lot for, tourists that are coming in who want to, walk down the trail system. So I think they're trying to, at one point, expand that trail system. But as you know, that's a difficult piece of property with the massive old industrial site and with the ravine, and obviously the overarching bridge. Steel bridge, but that area really needs to be looked at from a public safety standpoint as we try to expand recreational opportunities for the general public. We really do have to look at the safety component of it. And I think that's a concern with all the local municipalities. I imagine it's a concern with the university here as well, and how to collectively come up with the right resources to come up with a safe environment.
Well, so because of the tragedy that happened
Mm-hmm.
in recent months over in that area, that's when they decided it was unsafe?
No, I think I think it's always been unsafe.
But they chose to develop it as a state park. So
Yeah, I think the state got it for whatever reason. They got it because, remember, that industrial site goes back over 100 years ago, but it ended up in the state's hands. And in the Holderness side, we did a tremendous, beautiful parking lot over there. But if you walk down on that side of Livermore Falls, you have a beautiful beach right there. So families can go down and enjoy that beach. That's not really the unsafe part of Livermore Falls. It's really, from what I can see, on the Campton side. And I think that's, if you go into some of those old industrial sites, you'll see beer cans and debris, and it's just, people get under some of those buildings, and the next thing you know, they're just socializing, or if they're out on, the watering hole or something. So I think I think we want everybody to enjoy it. I mean, from the state standpoint, and I'm sure the local communities would feel that way. We just want to make sure it's a safe environment for everybody.
yeah, I'm a little confused because they've closed the parking lot completely, even to get to the beach. So you can't just go to the beach now, even though the unsafe part is not near the parking lot.
Well, I have to
So
check
I'm
is
not
whether
really
it's a
sure.
seasonal. If it's a seasonal park, I'd have to
There
check.
isn't a sign up that says closed for the season or anything. It says it's still open every day, so.
It might have kind of temporary hours, but I can
I'll try to find out.
I can check.
Put up,
I can check on. But that's a good question. I'll check on that.
yeah.
And but I think they did a wonderful job on that side of Livermore Falls. It's
Oh, it
the
looks nice down
parking,
there.
and it also helps out the local law enforcement too, so they know that it's a defined boundary. You see the cars, they see who's down at the beach. The trail system is nice, and it lays out in that kind of kiosk area, kind of the rules and regulations. So I think it's been a good step in the right direction. We just got to go to the other side and figure out what we're going to do there, because that's a lot of work and a lot of resources to make that work.
It's an interesting piece of property. I got anything else?
No, just that, I put out my calendar each week, or my schedule, I should say, every week to the municipalities, and people were on my email list, and just let them know where I'm at, what I'm doing. Tomorrow I'll be in Shelburne, visiting the COAS RSVP Volunteers of the Year. They have a luncheon, so I'll be recognizing that group. Earlier in the week, I was zigzagging in various communities. I think one day I was in Rochester outside of my district, co-hosting a transportation hearing. Another time I was in Belmont visiting, a kind of a project within the community that involves state parks, again, out of my district. But sometimes I get pulled out of my district because of the topic or the issue. But most times I'm traveling from my hometown of Wakefield up north and over into the Claremont area, and just trying to reach as many people as I can during the course of a week. But there's a lot of activity. There's a bill that was up this week in Berlin, House Bill 324, that talks about the taxation of public utility assets at the local level. And there's a bill to attempt to give that responsibility to the Department of the Revenue Administration. Has created some controversy amongst some of the municipalities. So sometimes I will respond to a severe issue to a community that they'd like me to show up to a hearing or meeting to try to address it and maybe bring some ideas back to Concord. So I'm usually user-friendly. And then next week we have a public hearing on the Conway bypass. The 20 years up on that bypass project is up. So we're going to have a very vigorous discussion at the middle school in North Conway to discuss, what are we going to do next in North Conway. So a lot of subjects just pop up. They're important to areas that's why I always say, you got to jump into the fire, because there's a lot of work to be done, and you can't steer yourself away from the important topics of the day. Northern Pass, important topic. Economic development projects like the balsams, very important. You gotta get in there and see what's going on, how you can help out. We've had some good luck in bringing some Canadian companies down into Berlin, and one into Littleton more recently. So our team through our North Country Industrial Agents are doing great work across the border, bringing in Canadian businesses. And so there's a wealth of good activity going on. We have a new hotel that's being built up at the foot of Mount Washington over near Pinkham Notch, which is the 5th Glen House that's got all the footings in, and they're building away as we speak. And there are other smaller projects going on in the North Country, and I understand Tenny Mountain might have some economic development going on here in the coming months as well. But I feel confident that while it's not a robust economy, we're moving in a positive direction here in New Hampshire, and the more we can in state government support economic development, municipal projects to get things done, the better off I think the state will be. So I think we have very good leadership. I'm happy to work with that leadership to get things done. So I'm excited. I'm really excited about what's going on in the state. Concerned about the opioid crisis. I got a 17-year-old and 12-year-old, and that worries me as a parent. And that's something that there's not a day that goes by that I don't at least think or talk about that issue, because you have to talk about that serious issue, because it impacts our workforce development, impacts our communities, our school systems, our healthcare system. Across the board, it just impacts society. And so we got to be front and center in talking about that and engaging in that subject all the time.